Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt and welcome to another Minecraft tutorial. I really hope everyone enjoys this new intro as much as I do. Well, mistimed intros aside, we are going to be looking once again at the Hermitcraft button. This is going to be the last video I do on the button, and you may notice, compared to my original one, this one is a bit longer. This one has 15 lamps, whereas my original one only had 10. This was something I got requested to do after I made that video, was to show you how to make the longer version of it. So I did promise you guys it was coming soon, so this is it. I'm not going to do another full block by block tutorial for this one. That would just be essentially a remake of my original video. Instead, what I will do is a much more brief version of the tutorial, and I will just focus on the aspects of this that you need to change from that original design that I did if you want to make the longer 15 lamp version. So to start off with, because this is a slightly longer version, you are going to need a slightly larger area to build it in. This is a 17 by 13 area, whereas before we had a 14 by 13 area. Once you have that, you're going to build up this little system here. This is our hopper based pulse extender that we did in the first video. It is identical in pretty much every way to the first one. The only slight difference is this bit here is built at the 8th block from the left as opposed to the 7th like it was before. And then in this hopper here, we now have 2 full stacks and an extra 17 blocks in there. That can be any block, just so long as it stacks like this. It's 2 stacks of 64 and then another 17, because we were going to have more items than we did before in our droppers that go over here in a little bit. Once you've got this all set up, we are going to take our signal from this bit of redstone here, which is going to be part of resetting our system. So we're going to come up and out 2, that's exactly the same as before, but then this next bit is slightly longer. We're going to come 3 this time this way, up and then across another 3. So we've got 2, 3, and then another 3. And then this bit here is exactly the same as before. We have our blocks like this, with a block there. We have our repeaters coming here, with redstone dust there and a torch there. That bit is exactly the same as before. For our display, last time we had a blue block on this block here. This time we're going to go green, and we're going to have 3 blocks in the green there going off to the right like that. We're going to have 3 blocks of blue and 3 blocks of purple with our grey block on the end. And then over here at this end, we're going to have 2 blocks of yellow, 2 blocks of orange, and 1 block of red, and then we will place our 15 redstone lamps all the way along the top here like this. This part of our setup that actually powers our display is identical to before, except obviously there are now just 5 extras on the end here. We have solid blocks on the back of our display with comparators running into them, and then 2 lines of hoppers all facing into each other. This bit here is also identical before. We have a line of solid blocks with redstone dust running along the top of our hoppers nearest to the display. We then have a pair of droppers facing into each other, comparator coming out of the top dropper, and this top dropper is full of items. Now this bit is the only bit which is slightly different to before. We now have it completely full of 9 full stacks of items. It wasn't quite full before. The reason for that is because we have a longer display. We now need this to be giving out a signal strength of 15. Before we didn't need it to be that strong. Our little redstone clock down here coming into the bottom of this dropper here, that is also exactly the same. Just run a line of redstone out from this out to the edge and staircase it up, so it's running into a solid block placed directly below this bottom dropper here. Same story over here for this little circuit that is going to reset our hoppers. We have a comparator going into each of the hoppers here with a line of redstone running along them from this torch here. When it comes to the redstone logic part of this machine, the principle is still exactly the same as for that original video, but I will explain it again in a little bit more detail here, just because I get that it's a bit more complicated, and if you're not really a redstone person, it can be a bit confusing. So to start off with, we need to be taking an output for each one of the possible stages that the machine could be in. And we want to be taking the output from this redstone line here in line with the very last lamp that is in a given color. So for our purple output, for example, it's no good us taking our purple output from this block here, because when that counts down far enough that the signal strength is only going to be at this block here. It's not going to be reaching this far. That is in line with here, so it's still going to be in the purple area. But if we place our output here in line with the first block in purple, then when the machine counts down this far, it's still going to be in the purple, but because it's come down past this is going to be turned off, so the machine is going to think that it is in blue when it is still in purple, which is why we need to have it in line with here, and then the same going all the way down for the different colors. Now that we have our different outputs here, we need a way for the machine to only recognize one of them at a time, corresponding to whichever color stage it is at. So at the moment, this whole line here is powered, so all of these outputs are powered. But we only want to be taking one of them at a time. So as this counts down, these are going to turn off one at a time, starting from this end first and going along like this. So we can use that to have the machine say, right, if this one, for example, is powered, if anything to this side is powered, it is going to block off the signal from the output to this side of it. And I'll show you what I mean on these first two here. So we're going to have our comparator coming out of this one. And we're going to, what we want it to be on subtract mode so that we can say, right, if this one is powered, it is going to block off that signal. So that's going to run into the side of that comparator, and as long as this is powered, that signal coming into the side there is going to subtract from this, which means that this comparator is not going to be giving out any signal like that. If this one was depowered, so we can simulate that by doing that, then that one comes on because there is no longer the signal from this one telling that not to give out any signal. We then do the same for this one, and we're going to take the output from this one and run that into the side. Oops. So that we now say, okay, if this one is powered, it's going to block off the signal from this one. So now we see that that one is, oh, that's because it was on subtract mode. Now, so make sure all of these are on subtract mode. So then that one is now depowered, but if we block off the signal from this, that is now going to let it give out its signal just fine. When you have repeated that pattern all the way along, you will have a system that looks like this. Each comparator along is one block further out than the one before it, and then after the comparators they're going to be running out like this into solid blocks like so. This last output here, the one with our grey block, does not need to have a comparator, that just needs to run into the side of this comparator here. And also just note that for these sections here where the lines are not right next to each other, you're going to need to have repeaters running into the sides of the comparators, otherwise that signal strength will not be strong enough to block these off. And from that point onwards, ladies and gentlemen, everything else really is exactly the same as the original button that I created. We have our redstone torches on top of these solid blocks here, with our lines of redstone on top of them, like this. Those lines of redstone are running into the back of these hoppers here, which hold our coloured blocks for our dispenser to spit out when the button is pressed. We have our train of hoppers to take the item to the dispenser, and we have our little mini circuit here for the dispenser to spit out the item when it receives it. Over here we have this circuit here with our two droppers facing into one another, which is going to send the signal up here to let one of these hoppers spit out its item when the button is pressed. We have our hopper clock, which is going to be constantly running, telling this to periodically drop an item from itself down into this one, which is going to be our countdown mechanism. And last of all, we have our big pile of TNT to blow up the machine once it is all done. Now, if everything I just said sounded a bit confusing and you've no idea what any of that stuff I was talking about just then is, then don't worry, you can go and check out my original video, which explains it all in a lot more detail. And I will also be putting a world download for this machine right here into the description, so you can download it yourself and have a look around it in as much detail as you need. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for this video on the Hermitcraft button. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to click. As always, drop a comment to let me know what you thought, and consider subscribing so you don't miss any future videos from me. I will see you all in the next video, but from me and the button, that's all for now. Bye bye.